Hello, y'all. Today we're going to do a hurricane preparedness presentation. My name is Bianchi Hughes, and I work with NOLA Ready as their community engagement manager. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to stay connected, make a plan, and gather supplies. So here we're going to talk about a little bit about the tropical weather hazards that are produced from a hurricane. We might typically see damaging winds, tornadoes spin off from the hurricane, flooding due to the hurricane water, the rains, and coastal flooding. Even though the hurricane might not be directly impacting you, you can have some of these side effects is something that I call them, are these tropical weather hazards that come in your area. So recently, Hurricane Beryl went to Texas. Louisiana did suffer and see coastal flooding. Just to give you an example of about 5 hours, 6 hour distance, some of these hazards can affect us. So we start off with personal preparedness. So how do we stay ready, and how do we do this year round? So that's how we're going to kick off our personal preparedness. Some things to consider are flood insurance. If you're able to get it, trying to get all your different insurances. That might be flood insurance, that might be homeowners insurance, or renters insurance. And the important thing about that is kind of knowing your policy, knowing what you typically face at the location that you're at, and knowing what that policy says and what it covers, and also knowing your needs. So a cool tool that we do have, and it's featured on our website, is Ready for Rain. This is a neat personal tool that you can put in your address, or if you're looking at renting a location, you can always put your address in, and you know what your flood risk is. So it will tell you high, medium, or low, and how much on an estimate of how much that flood insurance costs. For certain people, if you're buying a house, that would be neat to know how much your flood insurance costs. If you're renting, it would be cool to know, do I have to move my car every day there's severe rain? Or if there's a flood advisory, is that something that I want to do and can deal with? And then start making those preparations ahead of time. So knowing, is there nearby neutral ground? Do I want to deal with this? Is the back of the house versus the front higher ground? Kind of knowing all those different things before you even jump in and want to rent a location. Next up, we'll talk about the basics. So these are emergency basics. So we say it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So 1 being stay connected, 2 make a plan, and 3 gather supplies. So if you're not familiar with us, NOLA Ready is the community public engagement branch for Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for the city of New Orleans. We do send out text alerts in English and in Spanish. So the best way to stay connected via text alerts is to send out the keyword NOLA Ready, all one word, to 77295, and that you will get emergency text alerts. Same, likewise, instead of in English, we also have it in Spanish, so you'll be able to text ESP to 77295 to get those emergency alerts specifically and only in Spanish. Let's say you don't have a phone, or that's not the way to stay connected or gather your information. You can also follow us on Twitter or X at NOLA Ready. Instagram, we have a page there, and then Facebook. And Facebook has a few more added pages, so we not only post our text messages in English, but we also have a Spanish Facebook page, and then an ASL Facebook page that we're having messages sent out in and video transcribed as well in ASL. And then most importantly, all types of hazards, information that you need, you can always go to our website at ready.nola.gov. That search button is the best tool on the website. You can kind of find a little bit of everything, and not just hurricane season, but all hazards. So these are some of the type of messages that you'll receive. It's not just text messages. Like in the middle, you'll see something that big yellow that says citywide freeze plan, that would be like one of our key messages that we send out about the freeze plan. And it looks like it's a small excerpt from our press release. So we send out press releases. It could be a geofenced text alert because there's hazardous material in that one area. Typically the ones that we do send out are like boil water advisory or severe weather alerts. So that's the potential for tornadoes sometimes. Neutral ground lifted. You can that allows us to park on neutral grounds, and things like that. So the key takeaway from this is after a hurricane, we would also be messaging about the hurricane, messaging about the all clear infrastructure, but we also have storm preparedness items or resources that you might need after a storm. So that's what kind of makes us different from other text messages, other outlets that are providing information. We're sending out an all clear. We're also sending out resources, not just this is the emergency, the end. So here we talk about knowing the difference between watches and warnings. So something that we typically think about or how we compare it so people can think about it is tacos. So a watch is like a taco. You have all the ingredients. We're gonna make, we have the chicken, we have the lettuce, sour cream, cheese. It's all there, but the taco's not made. So that is a watch in our book. That means there is a potential for us to have an emergency, the potential for that taco to be made. The other way to think about it is I have that taco, it's built, it's made, I have all the layers in the taco shell, and I'm eating it. So that is the equivalent of a warning. A warning means something is currently happening in the area. So I'm already eating that taco. The warning, be it a tornado or a hurricane, it's already here. It's happening. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about Smart 911. This is another tool for personal preparedness. So it is important to kind of know about this, understand, and create an account if you qualify for some of the different things. This is it's a database that the city has purchased. It helps us as emergency planners and as well as first responders that might need help. First responders that might be helping out in the community. It allows them to understand who's calling in the system because you've provided information to them, but also as first responders, as we see on the right, we get a number, a sense of who's on dialysis, how many people have a need for oxygen exchange. So different things like that, mobilities issues, how many depend on specific transportation like paratransit or other things, how many walkers. So all that information that you do provide, it allows us to know, okay, we need X amount of oxygen tanks already here. We're gonna need so many walkers or wheelchairs to be able to assist people in the different plans. No longer are we historically guessing what's going on or underestimating or overestimating. We have those numbers in real life because people are putting in information. So the best way to sign up for this is to go to ready.nola.gov/alerts. What's important about this is including medical information. So this is for anybody who kind of has those prior criteria, who feel like they're either medical needs or anything like that, or just need that extra assistance, seniors, if you have mobility issues, all that different things, or just dependent on a service that might be disrupted because of a hurricane. This is also a very useful tool for y'all to have that information in there. Important is to have those additional contact information, not just yours, but also emergency contact information. And then if you do know and are willing to share, your medical information is also important to add. That way, let's say, okay, in the top you put in you needed blood pressure medicine. Now we know who the physician is that prescribed the blood pressure medicine. we can also pull it up if you subscribe to allow emergency managers to see your profile, and we're able to connect that information for you. Because we all know that during a hurricane or during an emergency, everybody's frantic. We're trying to do as much as we can, but we tend to forget something or something gets misplaced. Whatever be the case, it is nice to have those redundancies in multiple locations, and with multiple people that you trust, to have that information, so that when you do misplace that one bottle of medicine or it runs out, whatever be the case, you can be like, oh, it's in the cloud. I took a picture of it. I wrote it down. And not just like what medicine you have, but it also helps us find who the provider is so we can refill that medicine. So we talked about how to stay connected. Now we're moving on to making a plan. So this is where we're going to talk about how to create and practice your plan so that your family, friends, and everybody that you need, your support network, kind of knows what to do in a crisis. So here we have a diagram. And the first question I love to ask, or we need to check in with each other, is what are your needs? Who are you supporting? And who supports you? And these questions are important because sometimes I'm supporting, let's say, a child. Well, then somebody else is supporting me if it's a newborn. And kind of understanding what my family dynamic is so that I can better prepare and understand my unique circumstances when trying to address these different types of crises. So this does not only apply for hurricanes, but also for other hazards. So another question would be, who's in your support network? So is it friends, family? Is it faith-based members that come out? Is it Catholic Charities? Is it organization? Kind of understanding who's your network and who supports you. Then you want to know who's your resources out of town. Is that a family member? Like, am I going to meet my aunt in Atlanta? Am I going to meet my lost long friend in Texas and Houston? Kind of understanding who's outside of the area of where you live and being able to reach out to them and connect, if that may be evacuating to their area, stuff like that. Then we highly encourage everybody to kind of check in on their neighbors. Once you have your plans situated, also try to check in on your neighbors. They might not know. They might need a question. They might need information. Just kind of checking in ahead of peak hurricane season is very important. As we all know, hurricane season is about 6 months throughout the year. It is important to not only check in on your family and understand what the plan is, but your neighbors, and as well, if you own a small business, what are your special considerations? People tend to think about businesses as those large grocery stores. Nowadays, we have a lot of different businesses. It might be e-commerce. It might be a small kitchen that cook out of your house. How do you continue to have money inflow? How do you continue your business as you go through a hurricane? A disruption of services. Does that mean that you're going to continue to pay your employees? Does that mean that you have to stock up on more fruit and vegetables if you're selling food? Different things like that, so you can continue to do the operation. Because we are seeing a lot of hurricanes that are having longer time frame impact on us. So these are things that you also have to consider, not only as a business, but if you're a nonprofit, all the different things, faith-based organization. How do you continue to do the thing that you have been doing while there is no electricity or, proper supply chain of items coming in? And then in the middle, we'll have additional considerations. So not only are we talking about what are your unique circumstances as an adult, as an individual, but do you have kids? Preparedness or making a plan for an infant, a newborn, is different from a plan for a 5-year-old. The baby might need more diapers, milk, all that different stuff, whereas a 5-year-old might need clothing. I mean, they both need clothing, but that 5-year-old might need something to entertain them. Is that a puzzle? Is that a phone? Do we have a tablet that's charged? Do we have extra chargers? Um, Same with, we touched a little bit about medication a little bit earlier. So we typically get a refill of 30 days. During a disaster, you can ask for an extension of your medication refill. That is having conversations with either your physician, your doctor, or your insurance provider ahead of time while the hurricane's in the Gulf. Other things that you should consider are seniors. So we typically also have seniors. How does that look like evacuating? How does that look like sheltering in place? What are their special considerations? For example, my dad can drive around. He's 80. He can drive around 2-3 hours. That's no issue. But can he evacuate and sit in traffic for 8 to 10 hours? So understanding what your circumstance also helps develop that plan. And then people with disabilities. People typically think long-term disabilities. I encourage people to also think about those short-term disabilities, where you just went to the doctor for a knee replacement or a hip surgery. Whereas it can be something as simple as you have to go to therapy because you went into a car accident. So I encourage people to look into what is your plan if you do have a short-term disability, especially if you have surgery planned for these peak hurricane months. And then also if you do have one already and it's long-term disability, what are your special considerations? Are you packing extra chargers? Do you have your electronic wheelchair? Do you understand how to go through the process if it gets lost? Do you have two? Which one would you want to travel with? Electronic scooters, same thing, just different things. People tend to forget, like, there are ventilators, there's CPAP, dehumidifiers, some of these smaller but very important assistive devices that people have make their quality of life different and better. And that also has special circumstances or needs, such as water, additional water for your dehumidifier. But if you're asthmatic, that might be something. Something I always talk about that is smaller is eyeglasses. That's an assistive technology, an assistive device. People forget. Can you drive a car if you don't have glasses? So these are things that we use on the daily that we don't even recognize that we need. Do you have a backup pair of glasses or contacts and glasses? Just little things like that. And then special considerations are pets. Do we have our pets' birth certificate? Do we have our pets' vaccination records, their medication, flea and tick prevention medicine? All these small things that might seem like a lot end up helping moving the process, getting into a hotel or evacuating, going to family members' location to stay out, ride out the storm. It's all made faster if we have all this plan in mind, and not just having it in mind. If you can, write it down. If not, talk it out. Talk it out with your friends, your family, because what we typically see is there is a plan and one person does know what the plan is, but then the rest of the plan isn't communicated to all the family. So if we do have people who are working typically, and the plan is to meet up outside of New Orleans. Where's outside of New Orleans? Is it Baton Rouge? Is it Biloxi? They're both outside, but if we didn't communicate, now we're going on 2 separate routes and the family is now displaced. So that's something that we have to consider if you're making these plans. Are you making them with your friends, your family, or a network? Having it well thought out for different scenarios, redundancies in place, but also communicate it towards the people who are going to use it. Next up, we talk about gathering supplies. So we already stayed connected. We know how to get the information. We have a plan in place. Now, what supplies do we need to make sure that we can ride out this emergency or disaster? So here we break it down into two sections. We have how to make a go bag versus how to make a home kit. So your go bag is something that you would have for an evacuation. So that's your typical birth certificates, marriage licenses, cash. That also might mean an ID. If you don't have that, it might mean a passport, but a photo ID of you, even if it's a work ID, would be important. Your cash. When we talk about cash, people, ATMs typically dispense $20 bills, $100 bills. We're looking for those smaller bills, that $1 bill, that $5 bill in terms of cash, because the electricity's out. So you're now purchasing things without change. It's gonna get harder. Some places will have electricity, some won't, but having those smaller bills help. Emergency contacts. Who are we calling? Do we have these numbers written down? Are they memorized? Do you have one person's number memorized? Do you have somebody from outside of New Orleans or outside of the state of Louisiana's emergency contact? That was very important. After Katrina, we learned that people needed contact information from outside of the state so that that cell tower could communicate. Other things are like medical records. Your car insurance might be something, or title of a car. These are all things that you might want to bring with you. And then we also talk about pet supplies. Do you have dog food, cat food, whatever pet you have, supplies, crates, all those different things. Toiletries, clothes are all some things that you want in your go bag. This is just a list to start off at go bag. You can always add on to it, change it, make it work for you. So that's some things that you would want to take with you to evacuate. On the other side of the screen, we'll look at a home kit. That are things that if for whatever reason you get stuck or can't evacuate, what are things that are different from our go bag that are in our home kit. So some of those things, we'll start off with food. The recommendation is to have items ready for 5 days on us. That has been a recommendation from FEMA. From after a few hurricanes, we're seeing the response and need for things are more so 5 days. So with that being said, you would need a minimum of 1 gallon of water per person per day. So that's some recommendations. And then we're also looking at 5 days of non-perishable foods. So that might be your tuna, your canned tuna, chicken, chips, enough food for 5 days. And you also have to consider how many people are in the place that you're staying. Other things in your home kit might be flashlights, radios. How are we getting communication? How are we hearing what's going on? How are we walking around? Obviously, both of those things require batteries. So do you have extra batteries? Not just enough in your bag or they're in the flashlight, but extras. Sometimes if you don't have children, we recommend matches or a lighter. That might be to turn on your gas stove. It might be to turn on a grill. Candles. Not recommended, but if that's something you do have around the house and you feel comfortable, that's another way to see and have light. So same like the go bag, this is a starter list. Some people, depending on your situation, might be able to buy solar powered battery packs. Different things will be also needed for your home kit, and it depends on your situation. Something to not forget is like those books and games, especially if you have kids, because they tend to want to be on an iPad or a phone, and at this point, this is life-saving. Your phone is like your lifeline, and so it does become difficult for a parent to be like, yes, I can give you my phone. So having those alternatives are also important, not just for your kids, but also for yourself. So we talked a lot about personal preparedness. Now we're going to go into what are the city plans. So we're going to talk about emergency plans and operations in place. So what can the city help individuals who do not have the means to get out the city on their own or just couldn't do the personal preparedness in a timely fashion. So here we're going to talk about pre-storm and post-storm evacuation. Then we're going to talk about emergency resource centers and then shelters. And then I do want to make clear this note at the bottom: all services are free for all residents, regardless of immigration status, identification, primary language, or functional needs. So it does not, depending on the circumstances of each incident, these emergency plans may be activated to connect residents to essential services and to keep them out of harm's way. So all these plans are meant to be inclusive and accessible. They're also, we have things in place, which I'll go into, how to help anybody who comes having a need for a mandatory evacuation or a major hurricane. So first off, we start off with our pre-storm evacuation. So with that, for the city of New Orleans, we call that the City-Assisted Evacuation Plan. This plan will happen in coordination with the state, National Guard, our surrounding parishes. It could be local, it can be nonprofits, businesses. So there's many groups that come into play to put together the City-Assisted Evacuation Plan. So with that plan, we will have, I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between a voluntary evacuation and a mandatory evacuation, and then explain how that plays into the city plan. A voluntary evacuation is where we encourage people to consider leaving the city due to the forecast conditions, and it may be dangerous. So that's how we encourage them to get out. It can never be forced, but we encourage them. For a mandatory evacuation, we're telling everybody that there's a storm coming. It is seriously a danger to people's lives. It is life-threatening and can impact infrastructure, property very severely. This is where we highly encourage people to leave the city. However, we can't force people out, but we can highly encourage people and make them understand as much as we can that there is a mandatory evacuation, that it can cause extreme danger to your personal life. So that's the difference between a voluntary and mandatory evacuation. Now, this is important because it goes into the plans. So for the before storm plan, at 72 hours before the storm is coming towards New Orleans, the mayor would have to announce a mandatory evacuation. That means we highly encourage people to leave the city because it's life-threatening, right? So she calls that order at hour 72. Between that time, we as emergency managers are working hard to get registration up. So for Orleans Parish, one of our sites is the Smoothie King Center. That's where our registration will begin for the City-Assisted Evacuation. And that happens at hour 54. So that is where the plan is for the RTA buses to be able to go to the bus stops on a Saturday schedule and pick up people and bus them to the Smoothie King Center. Now, with that being said, due to it being a lot of people needing this assistance or people using it, the timeline might be slower for RTA to pick up people, but also means that if you have a friend, a family member, if you can walk there, Uber there, you should be able to Uber to the Smoothie King Center. It just depends on your ability and your financial status. So with this, RTA would be a free pickup. So they will pick you up from your bus stop and drop you off at Smoothie King. This is a free service because this is an emergency that's going on. Let's say for whatever reason, you can't walk to your nearest bus stop. There is the possibility of using paratransit. So we can call 311, or you can call directly the paratransit line to request a pickup from home to the Smoothie King Center. Obviously, there is criteria, so they will be calling to ask questions if to see if you qualify for paratransit. This as well is a free service, and you can call 311 or the paratransit hotline to be able to use that service. So then RTA picks up people, drops them off at Smoothie King Center. They go through registration, and then they're put on the state-run buses. From there, the state-run buses will transport people out of New Orleans to the mega shelter. Could be anywhere that the state kind of decides, but it is out of harm's way for the city-assisted evacuation. That's where you would ride out the storm, and then from there, the plan is also to bring people back into the city of New Orleans, drop them off at UPT station, and they will be able to go catch a bus and go around the city and be able to be dropped off at whatever bus stop they picked up. That is also a free service coming back from the mega shelter. So that is the city-assisted plan. With that, I'm going to go back to the timeline and talk about at hour 30, all things are grounded. So what does that, at hour 30, RTA pickups in, and then contraflow begins. So this is where all of our lanes, and we'll go into this a little bit later, but all of our lanes of traffic open up and they all go outbound from the city. At hour 12, we have air travel that is grounded. So that means that no more flights are going out. This is typically the hour a little bit prior to that, where all emergency services vehicles, so EMS trucks, firefighters typically are also grounded. That doesn't mean that if you do call 311 and 911, they will still be dispatched answering the phone. However, we will not be able to send out anybody to go pick up people until after the storm has passed and the winds have gone back to a safe level for travel for our first responders. Because what we typically see is we try to go out into the field and help somebody, and that we have a potential for those high winds to toss or flip the truck or ambulance over. And now we no longer have just one person that we're picking up. We also have the two people that are in the emergency service vehicle. So we're putting more people's lives in danger instead of having people stay in place because of those winds. And then hour 0, that's where the storm is here. Tropical storm winds have reached the coast and the storm is on its way. So this is a typical timeline. This is a timeline that is ideal. This is our green scenario. And then I'll break down yellow and red very soon. And then I want to remind everybody that pets are part of the plans. So going back to this, the City-Assisted Evacuation Plan will have interpreters on staff, so actual people who speak your language. If for whatever reason your language is not represented by an interpreter there that day, we do have the language line that would be activated, and we would step you aside to be able to address registration, getting all that assistance that you need through that language line. So interpreters will be provided. We would also have a policy that we do not require IDs, as said previously. We would not be asking for anybody's IDs or passports or information like that. We are collecting names and phone numbers for to make sure that if you're traveling as a family unit, that you stay together. Stay together, and if anything happens to you, we know who your emergency contact person is, where you're going, all that information, but we do not require IDs or any paperwork. It does not matter if you're not a U.S. citizen. This is a plan that is made for last resort. This is a plan that is made to be able to help those who need it the most. Excuse me. So going back to that, so your pets are also part of the plan. So you are able to bring all your pets with you when you use the city-assisted evacuation to evacuate. You will have, if you use the buses, you will have a 20-pound or less pet in a carrier on your lap as you transport. But then what if you have 5 pets? So the other 4 pets would go into transportation for pets only bus, and that's how they would get moved from New Orleans to the designated mega shelter. So let's say that you don't need a city evacuation plan. That's where you have to make sure that if you're evacuating on your own, you also have your due diligence. You're calling your hotels. You're making sure that your family members don't have a cat and you're bringing a dog, planning all those different things out so that it can work out. We know that during the time of a storm or a crisis, our mind shifts and we get to panic mode. So that's why we're highly encouraging people to do the preparedness work now, have those conversations now, so that when it does come time for something to happen, you're ready to go. So here we talk about contraflow. If we go back to that main timeline, we're talking about how contraflow opens up at hour 30. So if you look at this page, this is a state plan. We see that there's 2 main highways to get us out, and then we have like I-10 that can merge into 110. So all these different things are ways out. This is how we use contraflow. We have to consider all these different items when trying to get out the city. I will say that this plan is getting increasingly difficult to put together. This is a state plan, so not only does the state of Louisiana have to be on board to be able to use the plan, but we are also relying on our neighboring states to be able to open up their interstates and put police traffic on the interstates, the exit ramps, so that people can stop coming down, so that we can put people here in New Orleans on the interstate to go outward. So that does take not only the governor's acceptance, but we also need police units from the state of Mississippi, state of Texas. And what we are seeing is a lot more rapidly intensifying storms. So the timeline that I did show y'all was the green plan. So that's when we have all the resources available, we have time, we have more than 72 hours to make the plan happen. What we are seeing are these rapidly intensifying storms that don't allow for us to have enough time to evacuate the right amount of people outside the city. So with that, we have created 2 other plans, which would be the yellow plan, which is how we have our high risk groups that we are focused on trying to evacuate them out of the city. So that would be maybe our medically vulnerable, sometimes our unhoused, people with high pregnancy risk, all those different people would be able to, we would be doing that limited city assisted evacuation for those people. Now, with that being said, the criteria are decided by our health department. In the time of a storm getting activated, the best way to go about getting that information is calling 311, so that we can connect you with somebody so that we can get that triage going. And then you go through the same process. You would get put on a bus. You would go out to the mega shelter. It would just be a smaller group of people evacuating. Lastly, we are seeing this red model, which is when we have 0 time. So this is where we have little to no time. Recently, we just had Hurricane Beryl come through to Houston, and so we did see that rapidly intensifying storm. I believe, if I'm not wrong, it was about like 34 to 37 hours of like planning before the storm hit Houston. So there's little time to plan for helping to evacuate people, mobilizing all the items that we need to be able to safely move people. So with that being said, we're looking at a post-storm evacuation. So that's where after a storm, we are putting people on buses and taking them out of the city because they're still vulnerable. And that risk of being without heat or whatever electricity that they have, those needs that they have might be worse. So we see that that can be a plan to take them out of the city. The other option is if it, depending on how we see the power outage map going in different elements, we might have a shelter of operations for those individuals that are very vulnerable here in New Orleans. It just depends on the situation. And that's why I say it's very important to stay connected, because we will be sending out those text alerts saying we have open shelter for medically vulnerable, or we're already calling down that list from Smart 911, different things like that, to be able to inform people that need it the most about these items. So post-storm evacuation, we talked a little bit about that. Here's a great picture of the convention center. This is after Ida, where we're moving items. We also have people waiting around for assistance. This could also be a point where they're waiting to get on the buses. So this is how this could look. And for that post-storm evacuation, this plan is activated when we see significant delays or disruptions in public services or utilities. That's when we don't have that power, where water might, our water systems might stop or back up because we don't have that power. So this is where we would decide to evacuate people after a storm. Next up, we're talking about emergency resource centers. These are centers that that are in different neighborhoods in Orleans Parish. They provide people with, sometimes they're known as cooling centers, some are known as warming centers for other events. These are places that we would provide AC, we might provide pet food, it might be MREs or hot meals. It depends on how severe the storm is. Water is something else we would be providing. Some of these sites have interpreters. So that's important for you to be subscribed to the right list, because we will be saying, for example, Rosenwald is for Spanish. We'll have Spanish interpreters. We might say such and such church has ASL interpreters. The goal is to have as many interpreters at each location, but just like us, they're also trying to evacuate or stay safe with their families. So if it does come down to need, we will message, we do have this language at this location. I highly encourage people to let us know, calling 311, letting, you can always call Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for Orleans Parish and letting us know that, or you can email us directly at ready@nola.gov, to let us know that we need more interpretation or a different language, or we need, we do have that. We have the capacity to ask for additional support from our federal partners, our state partners, to be able to properly help the need here in Orleans Parish. So yes, and at these locations, like the other stuff, we're not asking for IDs. We're not asking, we're not limiting how many people can get the services. If you need 5 plates of meals and it's just you picking it up, we will give you 5 plates of meals. We understand that sometimes people are picking up for other people, neighbors, elderly, family unit. You're the only one who could walk or drive to the location. So please ask for what you need. So like we said, this might be cooling, charging. So this is a great location to sit down, especially to bring pets. Pets are allowed in these locations as well. What we do ask is your pet must stay on a leash and have a collar. If the pet is aggressive, make sure you're bringing them with muzzle, understand what their triggers are. If they need to be in a crate, feel free to bring the crate, the muzzle, the dog, so that we can be able to cool off that dog as well. Or cats. I mean, all pets are allowed. But the importance of this is we're giving out resources, not just items, but also that FEMA assistance with language interpretation, different things like that. So these are some of the sites that are possible emergency resource centers. They're kind of evenly spread out throughout all the city. We definitely have one in each council district. And the importance of these resource centers or something that important for y'all to know is that it's important for y'all to stay connected with NOLA Ready. Obviously, the news outlets, the radios will also pick up the information that we're sending out, but we will be closing and opening these different sites depending on what the situation is. So, for example, if you live in New Orleans East and Joe Brown is your nearest rec center, if there's flooding out there, if the roof is off or flew off or a tree fell on the roof, we will close that center and we will message that. That's why there's a possible emergency resource center. So that's why it's important to know and stay aware which ones are open, because we're not going to create a second disaster within the disaster where we're sending people to a place that is flooded. And now we have to fish out more people because they're all in water, flooded water. Something else that we do see is I might live in the east, but I have an aunt that lives on the West Bank. I know the West Bank is higher ground, so I'm going to go ride out the storm out there. It's also important to know the different locations because you don't know where you will end up. We see a lot of people displaced or trying to move around. So I encourage everybody to kind of take a picture of this so you know which ones are the possible emergency resource centers around the city. Next up are shelters. So shelters are a little bit different from emergency resource centers or the post-storm evacuation. This is where we're setting up large scale, or it can be small scale. It really depends on the disaster. It could be for general population where we have cots and ready to go, or it could be for a specific population like our medical needs or unhoused populations. Each shelter will look different and a different size depending on the need. But those are definitely options to be opened after a storm. Here we talk about other potential hazards that happen due to the storm or that we caution people to look out for. Obviously, we know power outages make us all have generators sometimes, and most people have gas generators or some type of fuel. So our biggest recommendation when using a gas generator is the 20-20-20 rule. That means that you should have your generator 20 feet away from your house. It takes 20 minutes to pull down your generator before you start putting gas back in it. And it only costs $20 for a carbon monoxide alarm. So after most storms or crises, we have been seeing a lot more people dying, not from the incident that's happening, but a lot more from generators. And it's that carbon monoxide. We are seeing not only during after the aftermath of a storm, a hurricane, we're also seeing this in the winter. So that's why we're highly recommending people to spread this message around the 20-20-20 rule and to practice generator safety. Another practice that we have is in addition to being careful with your generator, also being mindful of how you use your generator electricity. So are you preserving that phone battery? Are you scrolling through Facebook after a storm? Are we opening the fridge and keeping the fridge doors open? We should always be closing them, have things disconnected. Once power comes back on, we see a lot of power surge. People get frustrated because their appliances go out. Do you have a power strip? These are all preparedness prevention mechanisms that we can have in place so that we don't have to go out and buy a $300, $500 stove. Next up is boil advisory. So this is something that we caution people. We do see a lot of people that do get desperate after a storm. So what we are highly encouraging people is if you do believe that there is going to be an outage, or historically, you know, in your area that you live in, your water might need a boil advisory. You might want to boil that water before the storm, and then it will be cool and ready to be used. Or you might have to purchase more water, or just know where your water supply your nearest water supply will be, because people tend to forget, like I said earlier, their medical devices might need extra water. If you're breastfeeding, you might need extra water. If you have a baby that has infant formula, everybody will be out trying to buy, and there's price gouging that will happen. So instead of having to deal with that and paying $5 for a gallon of water, let's go ahead and be proactive and have that ready, but also aware that you can boil your water after a storm, to be able to safely drink it. This is ways that we can get involved. So we have trainings to become a volunteer for our volunteer corps. Some of the other trainings that we do offer are active shooter preparedness, stop the bleed, overdose prevention, hands-on CPR, bystander response, business continuity, and today this is the hurricane preparedness training. So at this moment, I would stop and ask for questions. And I would like to thank y'all for all coming out to the hurricane preparedness presentation.